Just say thanks, Jake and Amber, for coming in. Jake and I work together as orthopods, orthopedic surgeons, both in the military. Jake spent time deployed to, I'm pretty sure, I think it was Iraq, and I know he graduated Air Force Academy, one of the top guys in his class, went to Mayo for his medical school. And I can't remember where you did your residency, Jake. I can't believe I'm
in San Antonio at the Air Force.
Right. Okay. San Antonio. So, and he was in the military for quite a number of years. He's now in private practice out in Arizona. And it's just a wonderful person, wealth of knowledge. And I want to welcome you. I know some people might have some orthopedic questions that maybe I can't answer. Usually I'm able to answer most of them, but
I think that's unlikely that there's any questions out there that you wouldn't be able to answer. But
well, we'll see. I mean, like I said, it depends on what the specific topic is. But so I want to know, just Jake, because obviously we've got this coronavirus craziness going on. I don't know how affected it is where you are in Arizona, but I'm just wondering because I know what you do for a day-to-day living, and you're not running ventilators and taking care of ICU patients with coronavirus. So as a hospital, have they put a restriction on elective surgeries, and are they sort of just kind of, I figure that's what I'm hearing.
For 3 weeks, we have not been doing any elective surgeries in order to kind of preserve resources, masks, ventilators, et cetera, for the possible pandemic. Well, pandemic or possible needs, yeah.
Right. And so has that, obviously that impacts your life, because I'm sure you're used to operating, 2-3 days a week pretty regularly. But are you being asked to do anything to help? Like, are they like saying, hey, you got to come help out in the ICU, or what's going on with it? People that you're not doing the regular stuff.
Yeah, not yet. They have talked about the need to have guys like me handling ventilators, which would be problematic.
I would be terrified of that prospect. As orthopedic guys, you don't run vents. At least that's not what you're trained to do anymore. So that would.
But if there's really in a disaster situation, it's kind of like being in the military. It's all hands on deck. Everybody doing whatever they can do, and if we get to that situation up here in my community, then we'll be able to help in whatever way is necessary. Probably just assisting the people that really know what they're doing, and we'll just be more people helping get the work done.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like when you're in the military, like when I was deployed, we had mass casualties, and I was in there doing general surgery, sewing up, stomachs, and I'm like, I don't. Obviously, we're not really trained to do that anymore, and so you just kind of do what you can do. But in the U.S., you kind of wonder, because you've got this specter of litigiousness that, if you're in there and they're asking you to do something outside your skill set, and then something goes wrong because you're not the best guy doing it, but you just try to do the best you can, what happens to us, or what happens to somebody like that? That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a concern, but you do what you have to do, and then you kind of figure out you'll deal with the consequences. You try to make good decisions and try to help people.
Yeah, and I see that, like, I'm following you on Amber a little bit on social media. I see the kids are coming home. Has everybody been kind of like brought in home from the coronavirus stuff being sent back? That's what's going on?
Yeah, our church, we're members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they've sent home all the missionaries. Not all the missionaries, but most of the missionaries, all the missionaries from South and Central America, all Asian missionaries back home to the United States, and actually back to their homeland. So my son had a companion that he was working with at the time that was in Bolivia, and he's actually stuck in Mexico because Bolivia's closed their borders. But yeah, and they moved fast. They chartered planes and got these kids out of the country because in South America, they're used to this kind of a thing going through all the time, and they're not prepared with the infrastructure to help the people. And this is just like the common flu. People are going to die, and this is what they're doing. So, our church acted quickly and got these kids home. We're grateful to have them home, and they're doing great.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for you guys. Hey, so Jake, at the hospital there at Kingman, do they have any cases in the community? Do they have any hospitalized patients with
We
coronavirus?
do. We do. We have several members of our Native American community that were put on ventilators over the weekend. We have not a lot of cases, but a higher percentage of the cases that we have in the community are on ventilators, interestingly enough. Yeah, so.
Well, and I think this underscores what a lot of people have been saying and noticing. And, I know having worked, in Gallup and in New Mexico, a lot of Native Americans, they often are overrepresented in things like diabetes and renal failure. And are you seeing the same sort of thing? Are these the folks that are on vents? Are they kind of this comorbidities, pre-existing conditions,
Yeah.
diabetics, obesity?
Absolutely. Diabetes, obesity, alcoholism. I mean, substance abuse, polysubstance abuse and just underlying poor health choices over a number of years. And they're kind of a little immunocompromised, makes them more likely to get sick. Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, are they using chloroquine in your hospital? Is that something people are using for? Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
May or may not happen down the road. I'm not sure that the studies are conclusive that it's going to be that big of an improvement. But
yeah, I think there was an RCT that came out of China the other day that but again, it's a small trial, and some obviously the French study, but it's interesting to see how that's been handled. I know in Nevada, basically the governor said, you can't use it. They put some serious restrictions. You can't really use it for coronavirus or something along those lines. You can't use it as prophylaxis for it because they're, taking all the Plaquenil from the people with rheumatoid arthritis and some of the other things. But so there's Becky is asking, and Becky's in Nebraska. She's asking if you guys are using a carnivorous lifestyle, and I know the answer that you guys are. But anyway, if you want to share what you guys are doing right now.
Yeah. So it's been kind of a long journey for us. We about 12 years ago or so, we started making some changes in our lifestyle and cutting out some different things, and gradually kind of moved towards a whole food approach and keto, and then was doing mostly keto type stuff. And Sean and I hadn't been in communication for a couple of years, and I heard his name on another podcast I was listening to. It's the Mike Mutzel Metabolic Mike podcast, High Intensity Health. And they were talking about this crazy guy, Sean Baker, doing the carnivore approach. And so I reached out to kind of reconnect with Sean. And since then, we've talked a lot about the research. I've read Sean's book and read a lot of other things on the subject, and it just makes so much sense to me. So we've been, for the last now about 2 years, mostly carnivore. I haven't really gone through a phase where I'm 100% carnivore. I'm probably 95 to 95% carnivore. So, and every now and then we'll eat other things, and I think that's okay. But it's been good. It feels good. I'm enjoying it, and we're staying healthy.
Yeah, Jake, and I think just to add, because people don't know, you're also an ultra marathon guy, and you run these 50-mile races and stuff. And so I just kind of wonder, how you manage that. How's your performance and training? Are you still doing that much?
Yeah.
Performance?
Yeah, I'm training for an Ironman right now. It was scheduled to be next month, but that's got canceled. So it's rescheduled for September in Utah, southern Utah. But I continue to run a lot, bike and swim, and I've been kind of following Zach Bitters, your partner on the Human Performance Outliers podcast. I've talked to him and about kind of fueling and turning your body into a fat burning machine, and using that to minimize the amount of carbohydrates I take during long distance running and biking. and it's been good. I eat less. I feel better. I have less stomach issues during the middle of my training or competition. So that's been really good. And I think I feel better. I think I have less soreness when I'm done with the races and when I'm done with high level, the hard workouts. I have less soreness, so I feel better now going mostly carnivore on my athletic stuff than I ever did with any of my other approaches.
Well,
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, go ahead, Amber.
I was going to say, he did an Ironman. He trained for an Ironman when he was deployed for 6 months in Qatar. Came home, skinny as a rail, performed beautifully on his first Ironman. This time, second time around, he's been doing carnivore. He's not lost any muscle mass. He looks just awesome and stronger, and not working out, training as hard or as long, because that's my deal. Is I'm like, I don't want to lose my husband to his job and to his Ironman training routine. So yeah, no, it's a total difference in the way that he looks and the way that he feels. And on the second time around, being mostly carnivore.
Yeah, it's obviously for hanging on to muscle, protein is so vital, and then obviously the animal protein becomes a huge benefit there. And I'm in the middle of kind of in a leaning out phase. I'm going to try to be crazy enough to try this CrossFit stuff despite being 6'5" and not built for it, but I thought I'd give it a go. There's a as I turn, I'm targeting the 55 class, because I'll be 55 in 2 years, and so I'm looking at what those guys are doing. I'm saying, I think I can get there with enough. It takes you time to learn the skills and learn how to walk on your hands like a monkey and do all the gymnastic stuff, which I'm not suited for, but I'm going to give it 2 years. And so I'm leaned out a little bit. So I'm down around 240 down to about 225, 227, something like that, I think right now. So the leanest I've been in probably my whole life. And so, and all carnivore, all doing it on me. I'm being a little bit leaner right now. But what do you got, Amber? How have you been doing with the diet? I know you've been sort of playing with it yourself as well.
Yeah, no, I've well, at Christmas I did the See Everything diet for about 2 weeks, which did not do well. And but I came back in January and cut out all dairy, and that's made a huge difference. I also got rid of my scale because as I'm putting on muscle, it's freaking me out mentally. But I've been cutting out the dairy, which I have missed, but has made a huge difference in just the way that I feel. We were talking yesterday about how this is definitely what do you call it? A diet where you take everything out, and then elimination diet, where you can really feel how when you put something different in your body, how your body reacts. And since our son just got home on Saturday, we had a little bit of ice cream, and we're like, oh man, dairy really affects me. And so yeah, I really enjoy it. I feel better, much more better, mentally, emotionally stable. My stomach never ever hurts me anymore, and I'm just leaning out. It's great. I feel good.
Yeah, and I think that's just something that is really surprising to people. Is because we as you guys know, we've been kind of taught eat a bunch of vegetables and load up on spinach and greens, and they can wreak, not for everybody, but they can wreak digestive havoc on people, and it's interesting. Somebody's asked me, Jake, say 95%. What is that 5%? Everybody wants to know what they can kind of cheat with, I think, or whatever. I think whatever. But what are you eating? What are you eating outside of that? What kind of foods you eat?
So for me, it's predominantly eggs, meats, and I do eat cheese mostly. Times when I'm not doing carnivore, when I say, maybe 5% of the time, it's usually because we've got a birthday, I'm eating a piece of birthday cake or some ice cream to kind of celebrate, and then the hard part is I have a sugar addiction to some extent. And it's something that ever since I was a kid, I fought, but so trying to have just a little bit is the hard thing. I do a lot better if I just say, okay, I'm going to eat cake and ice cream today, and then I'm back on my regular program, which is just eating meat. And, you know, sometimes I'll have a salad. I used to eat a lot of salads when I was on the keto diet, but I've kind of moved away from that. My stomach does better not eating the salads. That's pretty much it. When I'm not eating just meat, or then I'm eating probably the worst thing possible, which is sugar.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably, and you know, I guess, you know, like I said, you know, if you have the discipline, because we've talked about this in this group before, you know, some people can get away with that, some people can't, some people have to, you know, just a wisp of sugar leads them onto a 6-month binge. And there's other people like yourself and others that are, you know, like you said, you kind of have this discipline where you can do it once in a while and get away with it, and you know, you just get back on the same thing. And you kind of made that decision ahead of time. You're like, I'm going to eat this way today, and I know tomorrow I'm not going to do that. You know, you just have that sort of, you know, or it's like, you know, when they do intermittent fast, like, I'm eating now and I'm not going to eat now, and I'm not going to eat again. And you just kind of have that discipline, but not everybody has that. Somebody's commenting on and again, Jake, I know you're an orthopedic guy and not a respiratory guy, but they're saying, you know, they're seeing that they're having a hard time vetting people with this virus. It's just not working like usual or something. It seems like it's more severe with this disease. I don't know if you're critical care guys or pulmonologists, whoever's at the hospital running into that. I don't know if you would even know, but
I'm not sure I'm qualified to comment on that. I do know that a high percentage of those folks who end up getting ventilated don't do well, and you know, as opposed to some of the other things that we ventilate people for. But I can't really comment on the percentages or anything like that.
Yeah, is there any? I'm just wondering. Well, let me ask you now about your practice, Jake, because I know we've talked about this before, and I know you've sort of been trying to, you know, have a lifestyle component to practice. I know you've had like some seminars. How has that been received? You know, particularly, and again, obviously you're practicing in a part of the country where there's a lot of comorbidity. There's a whole, you know, particularly Native American population. These people have just been devastated by chronic disease and Western diet. I mean, are you having any success getting some people to alter their diet? And if so, does it have any effect on orthopedic outcomes?
Yeah, some success. I have a few patients that have dropped a ton of weight and feel tons better, and now aren't in a position where they want a knee replacement. The hard part, as everyone here knows, is finding the motivation for folks to make a difference. And, you know, folks come into my office usually looking for a quick fix, and change in lifestyle is not a quick fix, and it's not a quick conversation. So trying to balance those conversations with the rest of my practice can be trying and can end up eating up a lot of time. So I have some good handouts, and if people are interested, I say, look, here's the things that I've seen work for people and the approach that I've tried. I think if you can change lifestyle, a lot of people are in an all or nothing mindset because it's easier to completely cut everything out. And that works really well for some people. But even if they can just change the dial a little bit in a good direction, I think that still helps a lot of people. And that's what I've been trying to do, is encourage people to make small changes in their lives, and, you know, cut out the carbohydrates, cut out sugar, cut out the processed oils, and some of the other things that we know are terrible for you, and recognizing that you're not signing your life away. You can make a decision today and say, I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to eat healthy today. And then tomorrow I'm going to try to eat healthy too. Instead of saying, I've got to do this the rest of my life, because what that does is makes people feel like they're in a scarcity mindset where I've got to binge. I've got to eat everything because tomorrow is the day where I put the hammer down and stop. And so just trying to encourage people to move the dial just a little bit in a direction that's good. Small changes over time make a big difference. People are motivated enough to make big enough changes, the difference comes a lot faster, certainly.
Jesse's talking about amputations. You know you have both done plenty our share, and I'm sure you're still doing quite a few of them. But they're asking, the assumption was most amputees were traumatic. You know, people had been in war, but the reality is, it's probably vascular disease or diabetes. Well, are you still seeing a ton of diabetic amputations where you practice?
Yeah, pretty much. I take call a week at a time, and pretty much every week that I'm on call, I will do 2 or 3 amputations, and not necessarily at the leg level, sometimes just toe amputations or partial foot amputations, but it's pretty common in my hospital. Every week there are at least 2 or 3 or more of these that go through.
Yeah, and I would assume the majority of them are diabetic. I would say probably 99% would be my guess. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, you and I saw every day or almost every day, or the sequelae of that. But most people, it's like, they kind of think that diabetes is benign, just take your pill and you're fine. But that, as we know, that doesn't turn out that well like that.
No, well, I think because diabetes is so common, that we are a little bit, our sensitivity to it has been dampened down, and the reality is it's a terrible disease. But because so many people have it, we're just accustomed to it and think that that's normal for folks to be diabetic. But that's really not a normal physiologic state. It's certainly terrible for you in a whole bunch of ways.
Yeah, Jake, I got a question for you. When you're in the hospital and you've got a diabetic patient admitted and you're ordering their post-op orders or whatever, are you having, what are you doing for diet for those guys? Do you have an option to order a low-carb diet for these guys? And, because the normal thing is, you put them on a glucose drip, you got an insulin sliding scale, and then if they're on a high-carb diet. Are you, the dietitians run it there at the hospital? Do you have any input into that?
Not much in the way of input, but they do have a lower carb. They call it carb consistent diet, which is lower carb and it's less sugar. But the reality is it's still, probably, 150 grams of carbohydrates on a daily basis. It's a ton still. We do try to, we just put them on an insulin sliding scale and try to minimize their diabetic medications as they're going through the post-operative process of phasing back into their foods. But again, these are lifestyle choices, and a lot of these patients, you are going to end up eating the Big Mac and fries that are brought in by their friends or their family members while they're sitting in the hospital and on a lower carbohydrate approach. They're drinking their Coca-Cola and pretty much doing most of the same things that got them in that place to begin with.
Yeah, I'm just, when I was, had patients in the hospital that I had switched over to either a ketogenic or a low carb diet, I would tell the family to bring the food in, but it was not junk food. I'd have them bring in, because they couldn't get it in the hospital. I couldn't order it, and they might be bringing in their eggs and stuff like that, where, instead of the hospital prepared food. Does your hospital have any kind of, is it just junk food in a hospital, or are they trying to be less, hospitals tend to have horrible food in many cases.
That's funny, because when Jake got to this hospital, he went in and it was like, threw a big fit about the food that they were feeding the patients, the food that was in the cafeteria. And have been quite a few changes made in the last 6 years, but it's a process. We live in a community that is, very lower education level, and folks, lower socioeconomic class, and folks in general are just not paying much attention to their nutrition. But the hospital cafeteria was set up so that the first thing you'd see when you'd walk in would be this huge cabinet with cakes and pies and cookies and all kinds of things. They have a great bakery there.
and then they'd have the ice cream, place where you could open up the freezer to get some ice cream and soft serve ice cream. And then when you're getting ready to check out, there's all the candy bars and other processed junk food there. And I said, look, we have got to at least minimize where these things are, so that we can try to help this community. Diabetes is so prevalent here. Let's at least send a better message. So they've decreased the amount of space that they dedicate to the sugary snacks and junk that is not good for you. And they do some good food, some good meals, lots of salads and other things that they're working on to try to help our community. But it's an uphill battle, because you've got to get people that are interested in that message before the message is really heard widely.
Do you find, I'm just wondering, culturally, are you having more or less success with Native Americans versus, other cultural people as far as willingness to change their diet? Because, if you look at, and obviously I don't know which tribes are prevalent where you're at. I don't know if it's still Navajo or what's the main group there. But I mean, if you look back into their ancestral diets, I mean, it was, in many cases, they were hunter-gatherer, eating a lot of buffalo, and that's their sort of genetic heritage. Argument with them, does that, or do you try, or is there any kind of?
So I have tried with my Native American population, but have not had much success there, honestly. The predominant tribes here are the Supai and the Wallapai tribes, which are
the tribes that are right there on the rim of the Grand Canyon.
Yeah, they've got, and I know was it the Pima that lived down in the Grand Canyon? They had like the world's highest diabetes rate or something like that. They have
it's
high rates down there.
It's a big problem, anywhere in the Native American population. Which is just like it's a problem anywhere in the American population, but it's worse within those cultural groups. There's certainly some genetic predispositions that have taken place over the centuries of their hunter-gatherer nature, which made it so that when they were introduced to white flour and sugar and some of the processed foods, they're genetically were not able to tolerate it as well as some of the other cultures. Just like if you look at the Alaskan natives, the Eskimo tribes, same type of deal. They were conditioned to eating just meats and fats, and now you introduce processed carbohydrates, and their bodies just don't handle it very well.
The other problem is on the reservation, they don't have the infrastructure in their community to even provide them with healthy food. Like, they have a very, very small grocery store that's / convenience store / gas station where they get provided most of their food. Right off the reservation is another gas station / convenience store full of processed garbage. In order for them to get healthy, like regular food, they have to drive the 30 minutes to come into town to our grocery stores here. And, they live on a really tight budget. They're not set up to be able to come in and get healthy food. And it's just a very interesting community and mentality that these people have. And I think that they just used to everybody having diabetes and being obese. It's sad.
Yeah, I know. I don't know if you guys know who Rob Wolf is. He's a guy from the Paleo Solution, and I know Rob fairly well, and I know that he and some other guys had developed this entire program for, I think it might have been the Cherokee Nation, and they got buy-in from the elders, and they'd set this up, and they were going to do this a big thing, and at the end of the day, the Cherokee guys decided to keep some of the money and use it on themselves, and not, I can't remember how it worked, but it turned into a boondoggle, and the sort of the hierarchy of the community kind of ruined that sort of support they had to help with that. So it's a little bit frustrating, I'm sure. And then you've got I know where you're at, that hospital, you've got an In-N-Out right across the street, and I tell people you just go eat an In-N-Out patty, and I know people get upset when I say fast food burger patties, but For some people like that are, financially disadvantaged, that can be a solution. And I don't know if you guys have explored that with some of those folks out there.
Yeah, a lot of my patients will ask, well, what kind of meat do you eat? And I said, well, there are some meats that are probably better than other meats. And, obviously you've talked a lot about beef, and I agree. I think beef is more satisfying and it makes me feel better. And I'm less hungry down the road. But the reality is any meat is better than the other options in terms of processed garbage, sugar, and carbohydrates. And so, even less expensive. The In-N-Out has the Flying Dutchman, which we like. But McDonald's, you can get a quarter-pound burger patty for like $1.30 at McDonald's. You can get a pound of meat for like $5 there. And that's what I tell people. Just go ask them for a raw quarter or a bare quarter-pound patty, and they usually charge you like, it depends on the McDonald's, but most of the places that we've been around here charge you $1.30, and you can eat pretty inexpensively. It costs you $2.50 for a half-pound burger worth of burger meat, and that's a pretty cheap lunch.
Yeah, no, and it's cooked too. That's the thing. Somebody's talking. Debbie was saying something. Debbie was talking about, she gave a talk about changing diet, and the Native Americans all laughed at her. Unfortunately, because I don't know if they have the fry bread and all that stuff. If that's a thing that the Indian fry bread and stuff like that was so popular. And I remember when Jake and I worked together in Gallup, New Mexico, for a while. We kind of moonlighted out there, and that was one of their big things out there. But
well, it's just so easy to store the processed food. The whole point of the processed food industry is to make food that is shelf stable, that'll last forever, so that they don't have to cycle it through. It doesn't go bad. They can continue to make money on it, even if it's a year old, selling it in the grocery stores. And so if you live in these communities, I mean, the folks who are down in the middle of the Grand Canyon, it's the Supai tribe, the Havasupai tribe, and they get on a helicopter to get out of the Grand Canyon, and then it's an hour to get to Kingman to buy their groceries, and then an hour back, and then get on a helicopter to get back down in. And that's like a 4-hour trip if you don't spend much time at the grocery store. And so fresh food is not typically what they're going after. They're going after the stuff that's not going to go bad, that they don't have to worry about bruising the fruits and vegetables. And anyway, there are lots of cultural problems and logistics problems and political problems when it comes to, you talked about it turning into a boondoggle with the Rob Wolf's situation with the Cherokee Nation. I have friends that work out for the tribe, and there's just so many different ideas and factions and groups that are, vying for control of the money and the resources that come in. It's, human nature kind of wins out in terms of, instead of the right things happening, sometimes, greed and other things take over. And so it's been hard on the communities.
What is the culture of your hospital with regard to lifestyle? Do they have much of an appetite for that, or is it just kind of feed the machine and keep grinding, and we're not going to really put much effort into that? What's that like for you? I know for me it didn't work out too well, but
yeah, I think I had more support from a hospital standpoint than you did in your experience. Now, I never really transitioned to spend as much time with patients as you did, but they've been willing to. They'll let me use a conference room to teach some classes, and they gave me some resources. Some people helped put slides together for me to try to help educate the community, and so I think they are interested in improving the health of the overall health of the community, probably more so than your experience was in Albuquerque.
Yeah, I guess because I mean I would imagine a lot of what you guys see are indigent. Do you see a lot of indigent care? I mean, this is folks without insurance, what they kind of lose money on, so they prefer to those people be healthy and not come to the hospital, I would assume. So
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely the case.
yeah,
Uh,
so there's a difference there. You know, it's kind of like I would imagine, kind of more like in the UK where they have the NHS, where it's all, nothing's for profit, and it's just, it probably makes more sense in those systems where you can just say, look, if we don't have to spend the resources, why do it?
hmm Yeah, well, it's better for the community, and it's better for uh, scarce resources, and making a change in people's lives is. But that's a slow process. It's hard to measure. It's hard to get buy-in from the individuals. And the reality is, it's like the old saying goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And that's really what it comes down to. You have to find people that are interested in doing the hard things. It's the many small changes that take place over the course of a long time that make people, that change you. And that's kind of it's not in vogue. We're all looking for quick. So I say we, not necessarily this community, but human nature is we're looking for quick fixes, and that's the reality. Is quick fixes don't change you. They might change your environment a little bit, but it doesn't make the difference over the long term. And that's what you really want to do, is find folks that are interested in that type of a process change.
Yeah, and I would say many of the people in this community tried the quick fix route and failed, and so that's why they ultimately came to this. Hey, what has been like for those folks that you do manage to clean up their diet and still go on to need surgical intervention, knee replacement, shoulder replacement, whatever you're doing? Are you finding a difference in their healing, or they're less likely to have complications? What's been your experience with that?
I probably don't have the numbers to necessarily uh, quote statistics on complications. Fortunately, I haven't had so many of those. I will say that the folks that clean up their diet, they take less pain medicine. They have less pain after surgery. They are able to go home quicker. Their muscles start activating. Like if I do a knee replacement, there's lots of places that do those as outpatients. When I got here 5 years ago, 6 years ago, people were spending 3 to 5 days in the hospital after a knee replacement. Most of my patients now go home the next day, and I have some that want to go home the same day, and I say no, we don't have. We need to take the time to set things up, because we just don't have things positioned for folks to go home the same day. But the reality is, when these patients clean up their diet, they feel better. They're able to bounce back a lot faster than I think they would have otherwise. I have a lady that I did recently who lost 85 pounds cleaning up her diet first, but she had a horrible knee arthritis and still needed to have her knees done. And so we did bilateral knee replacements, and she ended up going, because when you do two knees at the same time, they can go to an acute rehab center. The insurance companies will pay for that. So she went to an acute rehab center, but she was off her pain medicine like a week, and just over a week, maybe a week and a half after surgery. She was just down to Tylenol only, which is really pretty crazy for bilateral knee replacement. So.
And that's both knees. That's what that means, is two knees. She had both knees done the same surgery.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to hate doing those.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's like, because it's always such a pain, as far as just not doing the surgery necessarily, but the recovery afterwards can be challenging. And that's something I found too. I would have people, post-op day one, total knee, and they're literally saying I don't really have any pain, which as is a lot of folks are in there just doing everything you can to get their pain under control. And these guys are sitting there like, I don't have much inflammation, I've got very little swelling, very little pain. I mean, it's not a secret, and this is what surprised me, Jake, because there's not a secret in the literature that people that have better nutritional status, more albumin, they're different. There's different nutritional indices you can look at for people that are healthy. But we never really approach diet and say, well, this is the diet that gets you there. And I think that's, whenever I read all the orthopedic review literature, and it's like it never mentions diet, or anything more than just, not being overweight, but there's no context. Like, I think that particular animal-based nutrition provides better building blocks for what you're trying to do. I mean, if you think about it, we've just damaged a bunch of muscle tissue as we cut through it to get to the knee, and they've got to heal that same tissue. And what's it made out of? It's basically made out of
proteins,
animal proteins. And so if you don't provide back in there, it's harder to do that. So.
Yeah, I'd love to see some literature published on, certain surgeries, knee replacement, hip replacement in patients who have undergone 30 or 60 days of even carnivore or keto, or, some kind of diet scheme that cuts out the sugars. I really think that's the sugars and carbohydrates are probably the thing that causes more inflammation and pain and swelling. At least that's my opinion. I'd love to see some studies that to kind of prove that, but I don't know. It's not in vogue. It's too hard to do, I guess.
Well, I don't know. Well, we'll see. I mean, like I said, we've got this study that Harvard is doing. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that. That just kicked off, and so they're going to be collecting data for about a month. And again, I put the sort of request that people fill that and do that study, participate. It got through their IRB, so we know that we can get a carnivore study through IRB, which I think is a big, huge victory just in that alone. And then if it comes out and shows what I think it'll show, then I think we'll probably start to see some interventional trials, and that might be one of them.
That'd be great.
What a low carb carnivore, keto carnivore diet does with regard to surgery X, Y, or Z, or condition X, Y, or Z. And I think that's, so I think we're at the beginning phases of that. So that will be really interesting.
Well, I think that's one of the great things, Sean, that I appreciate about you, that you've kind of taken this on as a focal point to help to get the information out there, to make some changes in the world. And I think that's a wonderful thing, and thank you for the work that you're doing in that, because it's making a difference.
Yeah, well, I hope it is. Like I said, I've been putting a lot of effort into this, and obviously I've got my detractors, but like I said, at the end of the day, I'm trying to work on all fronts. Whether it's doing some entertainment stuff and trying to inspire people, and then also just trying to get some of the actual data and science out there, which is great that David Ludwig took this up, and he's a really well respected, well-known researcher. And I know Harvard has a bit of a mixed message when it comes to like their public health department with Walter Willett, who's been certified, but David Ludwig's in a completely different department, and so we'll see what comes out for that. This is Charlotte. So Charlotte and she's in here. She's in the UK. She's healing up from a trimalleolar fracture. But she said, her orthopedic surgeon was completely dismissive of diet and said, we don't really talk about diet and, healing, or I guess, I'm not sure what happened with her, but,
yeah, well, I think most of us aren't educated in diet, and the information and education supposed education that they give us is mostly based on bad studies and dogma and studies that are funded by the sugar industry. If you look at all books like Good Calorie, Bad Calorie, or Fat Chance, or any of that, they document how processed food industry has been so kind of the central in diet information that gets out to the communities. And that's mostly what we've been taught as physicians in our training, in our normal training, unless we take it on as a hobby and are interested in studying on our own. I'm not surprised that the surgeon was dismissive, because unless they have a special interest and have cared about looking into that information, the stuff that they've been given from an education standpoint wouldn't support the things that we're doing.
One thing, and this is one thing that I really was shocked at, my lack of knowledge, and maybe I just didn't pay attention, but I thought I did. But I mean, when it came to osteoporosis prevention, as you know, I'm sure you fixed your share of little old ladies that broken their hips, and that's probably half what you do on call. That's what, I'd be on call, and you'd always be fixing some little old lady's broken hip. And one of the thoughts is, we got to get these people calcium and vitamin D, but we really never, as a surgeon, never really talked about protein as a dietary recommendation. And when we look at bone is 40 to 50% protein, it's obviously that type 1 collagen, over which the minerals are deposited on. But I mean, even in the orthopedic literature, they don't really talk much about protein and being helpful for bone mass. And that literature is out there. Those studies are out there, particularly animal. Did you find that to be the case too with your training? I mean,
absolutely. We talk a lot about calcium and vitamin D, which are very important for putting on bone mineralization. But unless you have a framework, a scaffolding to put that mineralization on, which is protein, then you're going to limit your ability to make stronger bones. And in the healing process, I do tell my patients, I say, the thing that you really need is a lot of protein. Start eating a bunch of eggs, lots of meat. And for my vegetarian patients, I tell them, you've got to focus on getting your protein. It's harder as a vegetarian, obviously, to get the good proteins. I think animal sources are certainly superior, but I tell them to get as much protein as they can from their regular sources to help with healing and bone mineral density. And that's what I tell all my osteoporotic patients and their families.
Yeah, Jake, like I said, as Amber pointed out, you're doing your training, you're still doing a lot of distance work, hanging on to muscle. What is your protein, like daily protein? Or you may not be tracking it, but do you have an idea of how much protein you're getting on a day-to-day basis?
You're
about 170 or something, 175. Maybe I can't remember.
I don't know for sure, but I typically will eat. A friend asked me this question, and I went through the numbers, and I think I was like in the 400 to 500 grams of protein a day type category, and it was quite a bit. And my friend said, "Wow, my friend who's a pathologist." I was talking to him about the carnivore diet. He said, "Yeah, that seems like a ton." But he also is kind of looking into the research and saying, well, there's nothing in a healthy individual that says that that's going to be a problematic, not from a kidney standpoint, not from a health standpoint in any manner, as long as your body's functioning well to deal with that protein and to put it where it needs. And
he's also using it because he's exercising hard for hours a day on a bike or swimming or running, that's a huge amount of protein that probably most of the world could not consume in one day. But when you watch what he's doing physically, his body's utilizing it.
Yeah, that's one thing a lot of people don't understand. Endurance athletes arguably might need more protein than even strength athletes, just because of the continued amount of protein turnover that endurance training does, the constant pounding. So that's not surprising me at all. I do a lot. I read studies almost every night. I'm reading studies on stuff. And one of the concerns that people are talking about is with regard to insulin resistance. There's some evidence that branched chain amino acids, which are higher in animal proteins, can lead to intramuscular lipid deposition, which may lead to insulin resistance. But that usually is in the context of surplus and overfeeding, and particularly, overfeeding with fat and carbohydrates together. So probably in your situation, you're getting enough protein for what you need, and you're not overfueling, and I think that's important.
And that's the plan. And there was I was listening to a podcast the other day that was talking about protein and fat consumption in endurance athletics, and it turns on I don't even remember what the growth factor is. I don't know if it was some growth factor that protects your muscle tissue when you've been exercising. If you're in a fat burning mode, which is, kind of your body's in somewhat of a state of ketosis, even if you don't measure the ketones in your urine or anything like that, if your body's in ketosis and not running on the carbohydrate fueled system, then it actually secretes these growth factors that help limit the amount of protein usage or degradation during the exercise. So it basically shifts the dial towards fat burning instead of burning your lean muscle mass, which is, for folks, they did a study on folks that are just a regular diet, kind of a standard, not necessarily standard American diet, but a healthy mix of carbohydrates and fats and proteins, and then an arm that was ketogenic. And they found that the folks who were in ketosis during endurance athletics had retained their muscle mass better. And to the tune of, they said like a 15% improvement in retention of muscle mass for this group.
Brooke is asking if you're seeing a higher percentage of vegan, vegetarian, or other plant-based patients these days. Are you?
Not in my community.
Yeah.
Not very many. A few. I think it is more in more metropolitan areas. I think that's much more common, but not in Kingman, Arizona.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, because I didn't know if you could, talk about the quality of their bone mineral density. It's probably you don't have enough exposure to it. So I don't know if you looked into this, Jake. Charlotte was asking if there's any studies that look at anticoagulants, and specifically if vitamin K interferes with K2 interferes with bone formation.
I'm not aware of any studies on that.
What are you using for your anticoagulants these days, by the way? Are you using I'm assuming you're not using Coumadin much anymore, or maybe.
No, not using Coumadin, and in our vegetarians, that's a problem anyway, because it affects their the way their body absorbs the drug and processes it. But I mostly use Lovenox, enoxaparin, which is a low molecular weight heparin type solution that you inject, which is, the people don't like giving themselves injections, but you do it for about 10 days and then they transition to aspirin, is what I've been doing for blood clot prophylaxis prevention.
How are the kids eating? Are they thinking you guys are crazy now? Because I know you probably raised them to eat a bunch of vegetables and fruits, and now they're kind of like, wait a minute, what's going on?
They actually are so excited to not have to eat their vegetables. They do like, when they were in school, they were eating, they would have to take like a regular lunch with a sandwich in it. And we've started making our own bread about 15 years ago in a bread maker, and grinding our own wheat. This was one of our first steps, was to stop buying processed food as much as possible. And so they'll take sandwiches, or we try to limit the crap, but since they've been home from school for the last 3 weeks, we've pretty much been just feeding them eggs and bacon and hamburger or steak or pork or whatever we've got going, and they're thrilled. They love it. We don't have any resistance from them, and that's not that they don't like their vegetables. It's just a lot more fun to eat a hamburger or a steak for dinner than to have to put salad. And we have one that doesn't really like anything except meat, and that was just how he came, and so he thinks this is awesome. And we've always been like, no, you need to eat this is good for you, but now we're like, whatever.
So I think you guys still got the chickens running around in the backyard. I know you.
Yeah.
The eggs you guys gave me were great that time, so they're still doing okay.
That's been a huge blessing, because we have, now we've got a lot more people in our house. We've got 2 more additional adults in our home, with our 20-year-old twins home from their missions, and there are no eggs in the grocery store. Our grocery stores are completely stocked except for eggs, toilet paper, and hamburger, and Clorox.
Lysol.
Yeah. So that's been a huge blessing to have those chickens in the backyard.
Yeah, that's awesome, and hopefully, more people will end up doing that as they. I don't know if they some of these people are talking about, I know the dairy industry is having a hard time right now. There's actually dairy farmers that are actually just dumping their milk because they're producing so much, and the price they're getting for it is so low, it costs them more to process it, that they just have to dump it out in a field, which is, they can turn some of it into cheese just for long-term storage, but they're really struggling right now. So it's kind of a little bit of a shame. And I know
I hate to see waste.
many of us don't do well with dairy, unfortunately, but it's just one of those things we're seeing, and that hopefully the ranching industry will stay strong, and supporting those folks is important.
Mm-hmm. Now, Sean, you had mentioned about the kids, and maybe you can comment on with your little ones what to deal with. But I think that's a hard thing. We've talked about this, and do we get rid of all of the junk food in the house? Well, we want our kids to be able to be social. We want our kids to have parties over here, at least our high school age kids, and I think food is an important part of that type of integration. And if you don't have, I think back to when I was in high school, we were always at my buddy's house that had cold cereal and all kinds of processed junk food, which is terrible. And so, what we've tried to do with our kids is, we are eating carnivore. Our kids will still eat a lot of the other stuff, but we found that more and more they tend to follow our example, and we buy less junk food. We still have some chips in the house that the kids can eat when we have a burger if they want, but we find that they're eating less and less of those kinds of things because we're modeling the kind of behavior that we want for them, and giving them the choice, and saying, if you want to be fully carnivore, then we'll support that. If you want to eat some other things, we're going to support to some extent, but we're not going to have a ton of processed junk and crap in the house, but we recognize that's part of growing up and starting to make some independent decisions on diet and lifestyle.
Yeah, I think, same thing for my kids. I have them, I cook, meat, eggs, some kind of animal product for them. I have them eat that as much as they want, and usually they like to eat a lot of it. And if they want to eat something else after that, some fruit or something else, then they'll typically have that. And they are certainly welcome to eat vegetables. They never ask for it. I mean, every once in a while, like Emmy will want a carrot, but I mean, beyond that, they're not they're not excited, but they're pretty happy about that. Well, I'll tell you what, Jake, it's been an hour. It's been a pleasure getting to talk. I got to get back out to Kingman and see you guys again in person.
Yeah.
It's always so much better, but it's great to see you and Amber, and I wish you continued luck in what you're doing, or continued success. It's little by little, like I said, Jake, obviously this community, if you have people that need support, like dietary support, that want to go carnivore-ish, this is a good place for them, because we have meetings all day long, and a lot of people just, as as a physician, man, you got 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes sometimes to get through this message out there, and it's just not enough time. And so, we've got people that can spend hours a day getting support, getting feedback, real inexpensive coaching, very affordable coaching, and all those types of things. So if
Well, just for everyone else, that's why I reached out to Sean and said, I want to be involved to some extent, because finding people that are interested in hearing the message leads to the most rewarding experiences. And so I appreciate Sean and the work that you've done in helping create this community, and good luck to everyone who's working to change lifestyle and try to help change perceptions in the communities and the folks around them to help lead to healthier communities. So that's really what we want.
Thanks, Jake. Yeah, it's like I said, it's there's some issues with the healthcare system, particularly when it comes to chronic disease. I think the healthcare system got some healing to do its own, but then again, it's a kind of a combined effort, because we still need the docs to take care of all the acute stuff and help with that stuff. But the lifestyle stuff is, unfortunately, most physicians just don't have even if they have the inclination and the desire, they don't have the time. The system's not set up for that, unfortunately. So that's the problem.
Okay.
Guys, Amber, you guys have a great day. Stay safe. Say hi to the kids.
Come out and see us, Sean.
I will be happy to once we get allowed to travel and stuff, Anyway, I'm going to end this meeting. BNS, I'll see you on Skype in a minute, okay? All right, guys. Take care. Take care, everybody. Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.